Next, Trevor Lawrence, Jacksonville. Joe Burrow, Cincinnati. Jalen Hurts, Philadelphia. Tua Tagovailoa, Miami. Josh Allen, Buffalo. Lamar Jackson, Baltimore. Brock Purdy, San Fran. All feathers on the spear of Pat Mahomes, KCQB. Hi everyone, Will O'Toole welcoming you to another edition of Park Ridge Sports History. This week I'd like to focus on what's going to be really the final push of winter party event, and that is, of course, the Super Bowl being waged this year on February 11th, almost just a week away from what I've always said was going to be the future of the NFL Super Bowl would be played on President's Weekend. And as I've stated in the past, it's not that hard to do. All you have to do is really give each, if they actually gave every franchise an added week or maybe 2 weeks off of the season, so almost one per month, you could really just go right from the championship game right to the Super Bowl, which would be played on President's Day weekend. And that would be a nice segue from, just giving everyone a week off, playing 3 games every 4 weeks or whatever. It would lead right into President's Day weekend for the Super Bowl. And you wouldn't need the 2 weeks, which is really, really what the NFL has tried to do unsuccessfully, is somehow stage an all-star game and really just name the players, don't play the game, just have the Super Bowl and let the players after the season is finished just get healthy and just rest, relax, and get in shape for the next year, because nobody wants to be at the Pro Bowl. I think that's a sentence worse than death for many of the players. They don't want to come back, especially if you were eliminated and you played, let's say, for a terrible team, and now you have to wait like 4 or 5 weeks just to play in the All-Star game if you were, or the Pro Bowl. Let's just call it what it's really named. If you've been named from one of those teams and you have to play in the Pro Bowl 5 weeks later, like who cares? Just pay them the money in their bonus and let them go home. You're actually saving yourself some unintended consequences, like really an injury. No matter how much they try to keep the players healthy, anything can happen, especially playing flag football or all these little games and special events that they have for the players and the fans. Just end the season. Name your Pro Bowl players and concentrate on the playoffs and the Super Bowls. Anyway, that's my little editorial on it. But I thought what would be fun today is compare, and of course this is coming down the road because I was talking to a buddy of mine, Brady, of course, with the 7 championships or Super Bowl wins against 3 losses, 10 times he's been in the Super Bowl in the 57-year history of the game. It's incredible when you think about it. That's why he is seen as the greatest of all time, the GOAT. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Pat Mahomes, and I've argued one way and the other, but boy, oh boy, he's exciting. He reminds me, he is not, and I think this is what makes him so much fun. He's not the corporate quarterback. He does things on the fly, as if you were playing with him out in the street or on the field, and you were playing, let's say, 2-hand touch, and he does all this magical stuff with the football. Very much so like one of my favorite players of all time in college, Doug Flutie. They were just magical with the ball. You just never know what they're going to do. And of course, Mahomes has brought in this, the little side, back flips, everything. He's made it exciting, the position. Once again, exciting. And just a great athlete. And the danger of trying to sack him and then him just exploding or finding that hole or the seams between the pass rush. That's what makes him so dangerous. Brady, of course, is the typical drop back passer, much in the mold of, let's say, the 1960s players that I remember, like the Johnny Unitas's. And or even the Joe Namath. Well, Namath was a running quarterback in college, and then unfortunately, knee injuries and all the rest of it really made him a typical drop back passer. But anyway, Mahomes is exciting for the double barrel of action he can give you. His great arm, his his great speed, elusive speed, and you just never know what he's going to do with the ball. He ad-libs so much, and it's a lot of fun. Anyway, I was thinking about this as I was trying to set up kind of a research. I figured since Mahomes is slowly being, well, I shouldn't say slowly, but many people are saying, wow, is he going to turn into the greatest of all time? Does he have really enough chances to rival Tom Brady and get to enough Super Bowls? And I'll tell you, Kansas City is without a doubt. I know there were probably some pundits that gave them up for dead this year because they slumped. They weren't getting the wide receiver. Their offense wasn't really clicking. They had a couple of injuries. And I know that there were some people who kind of soured. I myself took Buffalo. I just thought at that point, 6-6, I thought really Josh Allen was going to get them over the hump. So as usual, I was wrong. Don't ever listen to my predictions, especially about University of Michigan. Remember, I was rooting for Washington, and how did that turn out for me? But Mahomes is really slowly making comparisons with Brady. And I shouldn't say slowly, but they're just as one of the great quarterbacks of all time. He's won 2 championships, gotten the 3 Super Bowls. Now he's in his 4th. Boy, oh boy, if he can win his 3rd, I mean, you have Montana, of course. You have Bradshaw with 4 each. You have a number with 2 each, Eli, Peyton, Elway, Bart Starr, Roger Staubach, Bob Greasy. So he would get into a new stratosphere with the 3, still below. But he's young enough, and that team is strong enough and built that they could compete for the next 3-4 years. And if he can convert that into, let's say, 2 or 3 more Super Bowls, boy, oh boy, he walks away potentially with 5 Super Bowl wins. You might be talking about the greatest of all time. So anyway, I was looking, and when I was doing my cartoon today, I was saying to myself, boy, oh boy, all of the quarterbacks that he has beaten are not tomato cans. They are regarded as top-notch quarterbacks in the league right now. Now, are all of them Hall of Famers? Remains to be seen. Do they have talent that is above the cut of other quarterbacks in the league? I don't see any question that not. I mean, Trevor Lawrence. You have Tua. I'm not going to pronounce his last name. I kind of on that one as well. Jalen Hurts, and he might have been hurt this year. Maybe that's why the Philadelphia Eagles had really a disappointing ending. You have Joe Burrow. Personally, I've said this before, probably had the greatest Heisman Trophy season in the history of college game. Goes 15-0, wins a college championship, and as I've stated before, his games only got better against the better competition. To me, you can't find a better player who had a greater Heisman Trophy year than Joe Burrow. And I know the game has expanded from, let's say, 10 or 9 games and a bowl game to now 15 because you're playing a conference championship plus playoff games and all the rest of it. That remains that Burrow accomplished everything, undefeated season, just incredible. And I know he's got a lot of talent. Got hurt this year. We'll see what happens. Does he have Hall of Fame possibilities? Yeah, I think all of these guys do. I mean, the league loves Josh Allen. Lamar Jackson is probably outside of Mahomes. He's probably the most exciting player in the AFC. Probably will win the MVP. He's probably the most exciting player in the AFC, if not in all of football, because he's big, he's strong, he's fast, he's got a great arm, and really has done unbelievable things for Baltimore. Probably should have won the game in many respects yesterday, had opportunities. And of course, you have in the NFC, you've got Brock Purdy, the last player selected in the draft, and here he is leading the 49ers of Joe Montana and Steve Young fame into the Super Bowl. And I was rooting for the Lions. There's something, I guess, with me and teams from Michigan. When I root for them, they lose. When I root against them, they win. I was actually rooting against the Lions the previous week, and they win. This time I was rooting for them. Did I feel secure when they took the 24-7 lead? No. But I did feel like, wow, they did overwhelm them. They had a 1st and goal there, and they couldn't get the ball over with 3 timeouts, 30 seconds, which is a lifetime if you have 3 timeouts. It was disappointing that they did get the 3. I shouldn't say they settled. So they tacked on points. I thought the biggest mistake in the game for the Lions was when they were up 24-10, drove the field after the Niners scored the field goal to start the second half, and had the 4th and 2 and 4th and 3, albeit it would have been a long field goal attempt, but their kicker had the range. I think they're at the 32, let's just say the 33. So you're talking about a 50-yard kick. I think it was even closer. I think it would have been a 47-yard kick. And okay, 3 yards does make a big deal. And I'm not saying the kicker for the Lions would have made the field goal. However, it was definitely within his range. At that point, why gamble? And I get what Dan Campbell was trying to do. He gambled all year, went for it on 4th down all the time. But it was a different set of circumstances. And sometimes you got to see this. They just scored, just match them. And had they gone up 27-10, I think it would have taken a little wind out of the 49ers' sails. As it was, the Niners stop them on downs, turn around, score, make it 24-17. On the ensuing kickoff and the first play from scrimmage, the Lions fumble. Ball game is over right there. It's 24-24. And I know that the Lions, there was more criticism of the Lions not going for it when they were down 27-24, when they could have kicked a field goal from basically the same spot. But I think what was going through the minds of Campbell, and I was talking to another guy about this, had they gotten the 1st down there, they would have taken off probably another 2 minutes, maybe gotten another 8-9 yards, set it up maybe for a field goal to tie it, given the Niners less time to work with, or even driven in for a touchdown, maybe soaked up the rest of the time. I think there were 6 or 7 minutes to go. Maybe they leave the Niners with just a minute to go, and they would have had to score a touchdown. As it is, those two Lion miscues or misfortunes, it's going to drive them crazy until next September. They're a good team, not a great team. Do I think they'll be back next year? Well, anybody can make predictions about that. They had a nice team. They're going to have problems with Green Bay, though, next year. I love, no pun intended, as the Green Bay quarterback. But the Lions should be able to compete. But it's so tough. It's so hard to get back in that 1 point. Lamar Jackson was saying yesterday how it's so tough to lose because you don't know. You really don't know whether you're going to be back. And the biggest thing in football is the fact that really careers are so short compared to the rest. 3 years, basically, for NFL players. Yes, quarterbacks who are the trade, who are the face of the franchise. Yeah, they stay around, and the team really identifies with the quarterback. And maybe they can get back a few more times, a la Mahomes, a la Brady, and all the rest of it. But for those other players, it's such a battle. It's so tough. And I really do believe this. I think it's easy. It's tougher to lose in the championship than it is in the Super Bowl, because at least in the Super Bowl, you've gotten there, and you can always take some pride in the fact that you were the AFC or NFC champs, and you got to the grand game. Didn't win, and it is tough, but I think getting there is such a big, big thing in a football player's career. Never get an opportunity to play in the Super Bowl. Oh, it's got to be crushing, especially with all the time, energy, injuries that you sustain. It's tough. Anyway, let's talk about Mahomes and Brady. I was looking at some of the things, and this is why I did this cartoon. I was looking at some of the quarterbacks that Mahomes has been matched up with in the last 2 years. They are all quality quarterbacks. So then I went back and I said, gee, I wonder how other winning Super Bowl quarterbacks, what opponents they faced in either the Super Bowl or on the way to the grand game. And I started all the way back with Bart Starr. Now, Bart Starr won 2 championships. He's a Hall of Famer. He beat a very good Don Meredith in back-to-back championships. Remember the first game played in Dallas. That ended with Meredith throwing a interception basically at the goal line. And then, of course, the Ice Bowl game with Starr on third down just digging his way over on a quarterback sneak to win the game. And Starr beats Lenny Dawson, in the first game ever played, Super Bowl. He beat a good player, Darryl LaMonica. And if you take a look at LaMonica and his playoffs, man, he got hurt a lot in the playoffs. The Jets banged him up many times during those years, those 60s. LaMonica got hurt. He was a fun player to watch. And I know a lot of NFL fans today, especially kids, don't appreciate what it was like when you called Darryl LaMonica the Mad Bomber, but they simply did not throw the ball like they do today. But the Raiders, when they threw, man, they didn't care where they were on the field. They just threw bombs. And of course, LaMonica had a great arm. Notre Dame guy, former Buffalo Bill, traded to the Raiders, had some great years with the Raiders, but of course, really sustained a lot of injuries. Then I was looking, all right, Namath, he beats LaMonica, and here's the case. In that championship game, he beat actually LaMonica. LaMonica got hurt in that playoff game with the Jets at Shea Stadium, and Blanda had to relieve him. And then, of course, Super Bowl III, Earl Morrall started, NFL MVP, good player, solid. And, of course, Johnny Unitas, who had been hurt all year, comes in off the bench, kind of rallies the Colts. But there, Namath technically faced a Hall of Famer. All right. Dawson, of course, returns. He beats Namath in the playoff, beats LaMonica, and beats Joe Kapp. Now, Joe Kapp was a tough football player, but you would never mistake him for being Tom Brady or a Roger Staubach or even a Terry Bradshaw. He kind of threw the ball as if it was a rugby ball. It always seemed like he was throwing the ball in the middle instead of kind of towards the end. And he kind of like threw it like it was a loaf of bread. He was fun. He was exciting. He was tough as nails. And in fact, he does play a couple of guards and stuff like that in movies later on in his career. Johnny Unitas, of course, he played in the Blunder Bowl, and or the Blooper Bowl. Blunder or Blooper Bowl. Regardless, we're going to do a show on that. 11 turnovers in that game. They had more turnovers than the baker I go to on Sunday. Staubach, of course, ready for this. He faced a guy by the name of Gary Quazzo and 2 years in a row, John Brody. But he does beat Greasy, Hall of Famer, in their first Super Bowl win for the Cowboys. Greasy back-to-back. He beat Bradshaw, future Hall of Famer, and Ken Stabler. I can't believe how many times actually Stabler was in playoff championship games. Really a good player. He is in the Hall of Fame, does win one championship. He actually lost back-to-back championship games. And then, of course, Greasy and Bradshaw in back-to-back years beat Tarkington, Hall of Famer, beat Minnesota in back-to-back Super Bowls. Bradshaw, of course, matches up. He beat Stabler, then he beat Staubach. Okay, so I'm going through all of this. That was really the early NFL. In the first, from I would say 1967, the first Super Bowl, to about 1980. Ready for this? Super Bowl quarterbacks and Hall of Famers. There were in those games, and that's talking about 67 to 80. That's 14 Super Bowls. 1, 2, 3, right? 14 Super Bowls. There were 14 future Hall of Fame. The games were played by a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 future Hall of Famers in those 14 games. The losers, you had Tarkenton, Staubach, Greasy, Unitas, and Dawson. So in those first 14 years of the 28 Super Bowl combatants, 19 spots were Hall of Famers. Then it basically goes like this. They went a while. Here's the deal. I think Plunkett should be in the Hall of Fame. He led the Raiders after really off the junk heaps of both New England and San Francisco. Oakland rescues him. He leads the Raiders. Okay, 50% accuracy rate, a little bit different in terms of passing, completion percentage than quarterback ratings. But Plunkett won. And as time goes by, I really never liked the Raiders. Still to this day, really don't like the Raiders. But as you get older, you start to appreciate these guys. And the Raiders really, well, you wouldn't bring them home. You really wouldn't bring them home for dinner. Let's just say that. They were, let's say, guys that were really, they lived up to their names of Raiders. Real combatants, colorful figures. With Ted Hendricks, the man stork. I rest my case on that. You had Lyle Alzado on those teams. You had, you had Freddie Bolitnikoff. Okay. You had Cliff Branch. You had a lot of guys that were, well, you had the George Atkinson. A lot of guys that were Matuzak. A lot of guys. As I'm saying, I don't even think I have to fill out the sentence, but they were as colorful on the field as they were off the field. They were as colorful off the field as they were on the field. And they did really bleed black and silver for Al Davis. But those teams were pretty good. What you do enjoy about those Raider teams is that they were able to, like I said, take guys off the scrap heap and somehow you put them in the black and silver and they resurrected their career. Alzado is one. Matuzak is another. Ted Hendricks, who played on three different Super Bowl winning football teams. Baltimore, I think Miami, and of course Oakland, the Raiders. Then you really went like this. Theismann, Plunkett, Montana, all right, Hall of Famer. Here's the interesting thing, and this is where I was getting to. Why I did this cartoon is that when I was going through the research of the NFL winning or the Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, I noticed a lot of them had this in common. Not many of them. I couldn't find a row or a consistent number of Hall of Famers that they faced in the playoffs in any one year. Yeah, Brady faced Manning, Hall of Famer. All right. Brady faced, well, I'll give you this. Here are the guys that Brady faced, and I even have this as the GOAT of all time. First of all, in 2001, Brady goes to the Super Bowl. He beats Warner, who is a future Hall of Famer. But I didn't realize this. Bledsoe actually started the game against Rich Gannon in Oakland. They beat Oakland. That is the Tuck game. Excuse me. Then they beat Cordell Stewart in Pittsburgh. All right. And then he beats Warner in the Super Bowl. Brady returns and he faces Steve McNair and Peyton Manning and then Jack Del Home. Then he returns again, faces Manning, beats him twice, 2 years in a row, faces Roethlisberger, and then beats McNabb of the Eagles. Roethlisberger, following Brady, beat John Kitna of Cincinnati, Peyton Manning, getting consistency here. Here's Manning losing 3 straight, Jake Plummer, and Mark Hasselbeck of Seattle. Even Eli Manning, in his years that he beat Brady, ready for this? He beat Jeff Garcia, Tony Romo, future Hall of Famer Brett Favre. And then Eli Manning, when he beat Brady again, faced Matt Ryan, Atlanta, Aaron Rodgers, I would say he's a future Hall of Famer, and Alex Smith, who I loved. I thought he was going to have a good career. Unfortunately, he had terrible break of his leg. Really does a marvelous, courageous thing by returning from that leg that was just broken in a number, I think, in a number of pieces, and returned and actually quarterbacked the game. Really amazing. Loved him when he was at the University of Utah and led the Utes. I think they finished 4th in the nation in his senior year, and they beat Pitt in a bowl game. Then I'm looking at this. Probably the best was Joe Flacco when he won for Baltimore. He beat Andrew Luck. He beat Peyton Manning when he was at Denver, and Luck was at Indianapolis. And he beat Tom Brady, and they beat Colin Kaepernick of San Francisco. And as I said, I mean, I could list them all and all the rest of it. I'm looking at Brady. Brady, then, here's one of the best. Brady, in the year that he rallied against Atlanta when they were down by 29 points, and he beat Matt Ryan in the Super Bowl, he beat, in the first round that the Patriots played, Brock Osweiler. I can't remember. I do remember him. I remember him playing for Denver. And then he beats Roethlisberger. In fact, ready for this, as I was tabulating everything, I do believe, and it's unofficial, I was just doing this real fast, I think Brady's like 28-6 in his playoff career. Of those, ready for this, he beat, well, I went through a whole list. He beat Peyton Manning 2 out of 3 times. He beat Roethlisberger twice. He lost to Eli 0-2. So against the Manning brothers, he's really 2-3. And in fact, 2 Super Bowls he lost against them. He beat Delahome in the Super Bowl. He beat McNabb in the Super Bowl. He beat Matt Ryan in the Super Bowl. He beat Russell Wilson. And probably the best of the lot, Pat Mahomes, and then Jared Goff, who is, of course, the leader of the Detroit Lions this year. A good state. Well, he beat, really, when you think about it, Kurt Warner, Hall of Famer. He beat Pat Mahomes, who's probably a certain Hall. If he retired today, he'd be Hall of Fame. I don't know about Wilson. He might be a cusp Hall of Famer. I'm not really sure. He does lead Seattle to 2 Super Bowls, wins 1. All right. Not really too sure. Right now, I would say he's a cusp Hall of Fame player. But he does beat Aaron Rodgers, who certainly would be a Hall of Famer. Drew Brees, I would say he's going to be a Hall of Famer. And here's another guy who might be, might not be. Phil Rivers. Could be, I would say, a cusp Hall of Famer. Not really sure. All right. Reason being, here's the problem with quarterbacks. You really have to either get to that Super Bowl and lose a couple of times, or really get deep into the playoffs. For Rivers, it always seemed to be one and done. And he had good but not great teams in San Diego and LA. All right. They had unfortunately for guys like him, he was really situated in a time when you had Peyton Manning and you had Brady, and to a certain extent you had Roethlisberger. Now, Roethlisberger doesn't have great Super Bowls, but he's one of those guys that leads that Pittsburgh team, very similar in many respects to a guy like Bradshaw. Maybe not great, overwhelming talent, but he had definitely a charisma that other quarterbacks have not shown. And that's why basically he's won 2 Super Bowls. And again, he's another cusp Hall of Fame player. Eli is another one. And I think even though he has a 500 record lifetime with the Giants during the regular season, he's got probably 2 of the most significant wins in Super Bowl history. Why? He beat the GOAT. And the one year he beat the GOAT when they were undefeated. and trying to best the Miami Dolphins. So in terms of sports history, it's significant. You can't really keep him out. He really was a good player. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame player. So he's 28-6, lifetime against all the. I just thought what was fun. I was looking at some of these players. Well, let's just here's Brady, right? And we're going to get to this guy, Montana, because so many people compare Montana with Brady. I don't think there's any doubt. And of course, another guy who went 4-0 in the Super Bowl, Terry Bradshaw. Many times, I think he's not given the credit due him. He did win a couple of MVPs in the Super Bowl. And anybody who ever saw that first meeting between the Cowboys and the Pittsburgh Steelers, know that he stayed in the pocket and was drilled by Cliff Harris on a pass play that went for a touchdown. And the pass was more than 50 yards. I remember it because it crushed me. It gave really Pittsburgh, I think they were up. It gave them a 21-10 lead late in the fourth quarter, maybe like midway, maybe even a little bit more, maybe like 5-6 minutes left in the game. But it gave them a 2-score lead in a time when you couldn't go for a 2-point conversion. It was simply a beautiful throw. And of course, that game was really Lynn Swann had some acrobatic catches in that. Of course, you've seen that one on Sports Illustrated's cover where he's juggling the ball as Mark Washington and he are battling for it, and he juggles it. He's in the air, comes down with it. Just an incredible catch. He had 4 catches in that game, including, I think, a touchdown. And I don't think it was on the bomb by Bradshaw, but Bradshaw sustained a concussion that game. And you watch, he's leveled. He's out. He comes off. I don't even think he realized that he scored, that he threw a touchdown pass. He comes off. Terry Hanratty came in for a couple of sessions. He actually goes back to the locker room because I remember watching. I watched a replay of the game. I don't recall it when I was in high school seeing that, but he returns. That would never have happened today. He would have been out of the game, but you can tell he saw more than stars. He probably saw the whole Milky Way galaxy on that play. And he took a ton of shots. And I think he's kind of been criticized over the years as being, quote unquote, stupid and stuff. But he's not. He was a smart player. Yeah, he made the occasional bad pass or a terrible interception and stuff. But he won 4. Not 1, not 2, not 3. He won 4. And he did it in 4 tries. Not 5, not 6, 4 tries. Good player. All right. And of course, there's Montana with 2 wins against the Cincinnati Bengals, against Boomer Esiason and Ken Anderson. Now, Ken Anderson, I just want to tell you this. Here's Montana. Here are during his Super Bowl wins, all right? Montana beat Phil Simms, Steve Fuller, and Dan Marino, all right? 1 Hall of Famer. Then Montana faced Scott Bruner of the Giants, Dan Fouts, Hall of Famer, and Kenny Anderson in that 81-82 season. Then he faced, ready for this, in back-to-back years, he faced Wade Wilson, still one of my favorite quarterbacks of all time. And the reason being, he lasted like 18 years. And I think for 59 minutes and 59 seconds of every game, he carried a clipboard. And yet he lasted 18 years. Still, the greatest job in all of pro football was to be the backup quarterback. He lasted 18 years, and I think even became a coach. He remains one of my favorite players for that very reason. But he did play that game. That was he beat Minnesota, and they torched Minnesota. Then they beat Jim McMahon, and then he beat Boomer. That was the game, of course, that Cincinnati was leading. Tim Crumry, I do believe, their lineman broke a leg early in the game for Cincinnati, and I think his career was over. But that was the game that Montana started basically with 1:16, maybe a little bit more, and drove the length of the field and was purportedly to say in the huddle, hey, look, John Candy's here. He's sitting in, let's say, row A, section A, section B, seat 3, row A, or something like that. Okay. Then you have Montana faced Tommy Kramer and Rich Gannon again for Minnesota, beat Jim Everett of the LA Rams, and then faced off against Elway and beat that future Hall of Famer. And then I'm just trying to look. Jim Kelly was a loser in 4 straight. Probably this is the best run, and it's by Troy Aikman, 1993 to 1994. Aikman beat Brett Favre, who would later on win a Super Bowl 3 years later. He beat Steve Young, who would previously win a Super Bowl. No, who would the next year win a Super Bowl, both Hall of Famers, and then he would beat Jim Kelly. So that was the 1993-94 Cowboy run. Aikman faced 3 Hall of Famers, which probably is the most impressive of all the quarterback matchups in the playoffs. Then Steve Young faced Aikman in a championship game, but then he faced, ready for this, Gail Gilbert, and Stan Humphries. Actually, Stan Humphries started the game for the San Diego Chargers in the Super Bowl. Aikman returns, all right. In his final Super Bowl, he faced Randall Cunningham and Rodney Peete for the Philadelphia Eagles, and then beat Brett Favre, and then beat Neil O'Donnell and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, of course, O'Donnell from Madison, New Jersey. So you can see where I'm going with this. That really remains probably the most impressive run by a quarterback on his way to a Super Bowl, beating 3 consecutive future Hall of Famers. That's why I wanted to look at this. Here's what Mahomes has done. All right. Now, if you think about it, even if you say, okay, on that page of the 3, 6, 7, 8 quarterbacks, throw Mahomes away because he's a Hall of Famer already. You're probably looking at 4 potential Hall of Fame players there. One of them, I would say, is probably Lamar Jackson. One of them could be Jalen Hurts. And if Brock Purdy wins the Super Bowl, he may be on to a Hall of Fame career, which would be kind of amazing since, he was the last player in the draft selected. Here's the guy I was talking about. Have to be very honest with you. I never heard of him when he squared off against Tom Brady a few years ago. Now, listen, I haven't followed the NFL like I used to follow it just because of age and being busy and all the rest of it. So you kind of focus on important games. That year that he goes to Tampa Bay, Taylor Heinicke was the Washington Commanders quarterback. And probably one of the guys who I think is kind of interesting because, not because I didn't ever hear of him, but because just seems to not be of any significance in terms of I mean, I'm thinking of this. Even Elvis Grbac, who faced Brett Favre in 96-97 and then Elway in 97-98, played for 2 different teams and got his teams to the playoffs. John Kitna, all right, as I said to you, kind of one of those guys that you never really heard of before or after. Another guy, how about Stan Brock, who faced off against Jim McMahon and that 85 Bears team? I think he was playing. Dieter Brock, that's it. Dieter Brock I knew because he played in the CFL. I apologize. Dieter Brock was the quarterback for the LA Rams when they faced them. And, of course, they were led by the former SMU halfback, who was really their offense that year. And then, of course, they played New England, and they faced Steve Grogan and Tony Eason. Eason replaced Grogan in that game. Eric Dickerson is who I was thinking about for the thing. Then you have, Wade Wilson had 2 appearances in the playoffs. Rich Gannon had a couple. Here's a guy, Jeff Hostetler, actually, here for you Giant fans. When he led the Giants to the 91 Super Bowl, he beat Tom Zach of Chicago. But in that really grueling game, you got to be honest with you, he faced both Montana and Young. What happened was Montana went down. He broke one of his fingers on a sack with about 5-6 minutes to go. And San Francisco was able to replace Montana, although it didn't help them at all. They replaced him with Steve Young. So technically he faced two future Hall of Famers there, and then Jim Kelly in the Super Bowl. So I like to look and say to you, wow, I think Mahomes is exciting. And if he gets a few more Super Bowl, like I was saying to my buddy, suppose he's able to win this year and win 2 more. Now he's got 5 in 6 tries and leaves the game. But he was in, let's say, 6 or 7 straight championship games. Does he move up to be the greatest of all time? Or do those 7 rings of Tom Brady mean much more? Who will be eventually? Will Brady remain the GOAT of the game, or will Pat Mahomes unseat him and eventually become the greatest of all time? This is Will O'Toole, thanking you for joining us on Park Ridge Sports History. We'll be back with another edition next week. Hope you join us.